Hello and welcome to Series 2 of The Joy of Writing. I'm your host, Mark Carew. In this series I will be talking to authors about the fun, the satisfaction, the joy they get from their writing, whether it's prose fiction, narrative non-fiction or poetry. My first guest in this series is Louise Fein, author of People Like Us, her debut novel published by Head of Zeus in the UK. We started by talking about the gist of the novel, which is set in 1930s Germany. It's a love story between Hetty and Walter, so a young German girl, and a young man who is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, saves her life and is a Jew. What was your inspiration for writing the book?
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Mark. So the book was inspired by my father's family experience of living through Nazi Germany. His family fled to England and to the United States during the course of the 1930s. But like many people of that generation, he never spoke about his experiences. And he died when I was only 17. So it had always been something I wanted to explore. And as I'd forever wanted to be an author,
Yes.
Writing a novel about it seemed the most natural way. I always intended it to be fiction, and the story and the characters are all fictional, but it is based around real events, and all the instances that happen in the book are based on historical fact.
Very interesting. And I know from the notes in your book that you did an awful lot of research for this.
Yeah, I did a lot of general reading about that period of history during Germany, anything I could get my hands on about the Leipzig, the Jews of Leipzig. I went to Leipzig a few times, met some experts, and I also had access to an enormous amount of contemporaneous family records, so letters, journals, official documents from that period, which was very, very useful.
And how did the story sort of come about from that research? I mean, were there? I imagine with such a massive documentation that there must have been several potential ways to go. Well,
bizarrely, I had the idea for the story before the research almost. So the story the story's never really changed. The manner of telling it changed a lot, and obviously there was a lot of in-depth things that happened through my research, but I had the idea for the story right from the outset, and then during the course of my research or as I was writing the book, I had to do more and more research to really hone those small points.
Yes.
So I think for historical fiction, obviously you need some general knowledge about the time period you're writing in, but also, all the tiny little things you have to research, from food to drink to, what people would have sort of said to each other, what was possible to do as leisure activities, all those kinds of things. And particular to a region as well.
Yes.
Had to be looked at.
Yes, it wouldn't be the same across Germany. It would be specific to Leipzig at the time. Yeah. And did you find that you enjoyed that, or did you find that was a massive undertaking that you had to plough through, or was that something that you naturally liked?
I absolutely loved it. It was half the joy of writing. I mean, I think if I could live my life again, I'd go and do history at university, because I just love history and the whole research. Sometimes, yes, it can be really frustrating because you keep coming up against dead ends, but that's almost like a challenge to me. I like then to find a way around it. So yeah, it's definitely half the joy of writing. And yeah, one thing I sort of forgot to mention at the outset when you were saying, Walter was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jew. Part of the reason I made him that was because, first of all, there was a very stereotyped Jew at the time.
Yeah.
And some of those stereotypes have, stayed with us. And I wanted to break that stereotype, particularly because all my family, my father's family, were blonde-haired and blue-eyed Jews. Yeah. So it was really trying to break that stereotype.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of sort of brainwashing going on, starting with the children at school, which I found a very effective way of setting the scene. And they all lapped it up without question, including Hetty at first. And that's just, you tell children something, they think that's the way it is. And some unsettling scenes with teachers picking on children in schools. I mean, I found that that was very powerful indeed. I thought her devotion to Hitler was verging, or intentionally, on the religious.
Yeah, and actually that was a fact. He was really deified. He tried to get rid of religion, really, in Germany, and it was almost like he replaced that. He was the father of Germany. People revered him, particularly children. I read and sort of listened to lots of people who've lived through that time, and they talked about meeting him, and it was just this extraordinary experience where they were so deeply affected by seeing him speak, that I tried to bring that out through Hetty in the novel.
Well, that definitely came through. That was really striking. At one point, he it wasn't the Lord's Prayer, it was Hitler's prayer. The words changed, and he was in that role. I found that very striking. And then Hetty did sort of distinguish herself, especially after the rescue from Walter, in that she was able to question some of these ideas. Now, based on the fact that somebody had just done something instinctively and very humane, saved her from drowning. He happened to be a Jew, and now what? I thought that was a very powerful engine for the book.
Yeah, I suppose it was also a fact that a lot of, prior to the 1930s, there was, complete integration of Jewish people into German society. So, everyone went to school together, everyone had lots of friends. And I wanted to sort of show how, people cut their friends off all of a sudden, throughout the early period of the 30s. And obviously that the drowning scene in the prologue was maybe an extreme version, but I had to make it succinct as to why he, in particular, she would remember him. He was a big part of her life. So
absolutely. So people cut off their Jewish friends just because they're told to. So again, it's just the it's more indoctrination. No, you mustn't do this. It's the power. It's nothing to do with what that person has done to you or for you or whatever. Yeah, that was very, very.
Yeah, and the scene that you referred to, which I won't explain, but where the teachers were picking on the pupils. That actually happened. Well, not that exact scene. The scene was an imagined scene, but
right. Yeah.
But an incident like that happened to somebody I met. As part of my research, I was put in touch with an old chap who lived in London. He was 94 when I met him, and he had grown up in the same street as my father's cousins, and he remembered the family very well. That happened to him, that he was picked on and then made to leave the school. So that, as I say, all the events in the book were inspired by something factual that happened.
No, I mean, that's a very interesting way of doing it. And I thought for the woman's situation, Hetty wanted to be a doctor, and her parents laughed at that, said, no, you're going to go to Hausfrau school, which I realised you invented the name of, but essentially that was the role of the woman.
Yeah, definitely.
going on to her relationship with Walter, I mean, it was very nicely done, very tender, because they're just two teenagers growing up together, happened to fall in love, and then both could see the difficulties ahead. And I felt for Walter, because I think at one point, he just wanted to be able to take his girl around Leipzig, and have a normal relationship with her, and you could see it dawning on him that this was just not going to become possible. And he sort of grew a bit reckless, like say, no, I want this to happen. And they sort of ran some risks there. I imagine that was very true for many people.
Yeah, I suppose it was just an act of rebellion. It was something within his power to take control of, and I think there was, as time grew on, people became less and less, they had less and less power, so I think some people have questioned, why didn't people fight back more? Why didn't they, sort of march through the streets? But I think as each little tiny step didn't really seem to mean that much, and it was only after so many steps had happened, then it was too late, and the fear was too much. People couldn't really fight back then. So it was really that, people had this sort of definite feeling of, well, we just have to hope it all blows over, it all will go away, it will just get better. What can we do? We're just little people, kind of thing, which I think you can see parallels with that sometimes today. Well, just as an example, something like climate change, we're all like, oh, it's awful, isn't it? Let's just hope, it gets
let's
better.
hope it blows away.
I think we can all perhaps learn a bit of a lesson from that at the time you can't see how bad it's going to get, but if you did take note of those little warning signs, perhaps you can avert something much worse.
I mean, quite right. I mean, it seemed to just incrementally just get worse and worse until it got, obviously very bad indeed. Of all your characters, which were the most sort of favourite, sort of most satisfying for you to write?
Well, Hetty was obviously my favourite. Well, not obviously, but she was my favourite character to write. She came quite fully formed to me, and she was quite feisty. I enjoyed writing her because she was quite confused sometimes, and she felt quite natural to me. And I also, I've got a character in the book called Thomas, who he's quite a complex character in lots of ways, and he was really enjoyable to write, even though he was not the nicest of characters. I think because I enjoyed making him quite strange and disturbing, he was quite interesting to write, I think.
And he was responsible for a most amazing rescue. Just when I was thinking, well, I don't know how she's going to get out of this, it all looks very grim. Where's the hero? And and then then the rescue happens. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes the most the oddest characters are the most fun to write. Perhaps it just it gives you free rein, and you can start being almost a little bit naughty.
Yes, definitely. And actually, interestingly, with his character, I don't want to give away too much, but he does do some some pretty bad things. And my American editor wanted me to make him a more sympathetic character, and to that readers would like him better. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. He has to be this person, and the reasons why he turns out like he does are all in his childhood, and you see it, and you can see why he turned out like he did. And I kind of stuck to my guns on that, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, no, he was very memorable at the end. I think another one, the character I didn't like the most was probably Vati,
Yeah.
Hetty's father, whose name is Franz. So Vati is sort of just father, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, he was moving up in the SS, and he's not going to be a likable character. But he was also, he was violent to his own daughter and treated her extremely badly. Again, I mean, believable,
Yeah.
but yeah, not nice. How did you feel about writing that character? Did that come easily?
No, he was the hardest character to write by
Right.
Country Mile. I really struggled with him because he is a bad character and not an unpleasant person. It's quite easy to fall into stereotypes, and he just kept coming over as being this sort of heel clicking, Nazi from a bad movie.
Yeah.
And then one of my university tutors said, look, even bad people are human. You've got to bring out some of his humanity, and I think that's what turned it for me. He's still a bad character, but he's also a sort of rounded character who shows affection sometimes, who is he, in his head, he thinks he's a good guy,
Yes, quite right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he sees nothing wrong with his actions. I mean, he actually grew from not very prosperous beginnings, and he grew into a man of power and influence, and so the times were perfect for him. So he was probably just trying to achieve as long as everybody else. The story moves on after. I mean, this show is full of spoilers, so we will drop in a spoiler. So Hetty becomes pregnant, has a baby, and then at that point again, I'm thinking, well, I don't know what's going to happen here, and then the amazing Thomas comes along with a solution, which is jaw-dropping, but very good. But it also leads into something very sad, which was the fact of the kinder transport, whereby Jewish parents sent their children to England, who took them in open arms, tens of thousands, to live with strangers, foster families. And I was thinking, people should not forget this. How was that to research? Were people able to talk about that freely?
I mean, there's quite a lot of information out there about the kinder transport, and I actually had a book about it's called something like the six from Leipzig, and it traced the story of 6 children who'd come from Leipzig on the kinder transport of various ages and what happened to them, and of course people in this country took them all in, and there were 10,000 came over, and they obviously took them in on the basis it was going to be a temporary arrangement until they could be reunited with their parents, and for the vast majority it was not a temporary arrament. And some of them stayed with those families, some of them actually didn't. They then had to be fostered or adopted by other people, but it was an extraordinary sort of event, really, that I almost can't imagine that happening today.
That's exactly right.
It would, but I can't see that happening. We have a refugee crisis which is slightly forgotten about with the coronavirus. But there are children stranded in camps and have been there for years, and it's very sad to think of what's happening to those children.
Yeah, I quite agree, and like you, I thought, well, just imagine this going on today. You read the newspapers about this, and people, I don't think they'd believe it. It would just be too shocking. Which just goes to show that we must never forget history, especially of these awful times. And for me, the whole book, I mean, there was a point at the end where Hetty absolutely delivers a few lines which nails the whole book, which I really appreciated. But also from another character, a minor character, Thomas's mother,
Yeah.
Mother of 7 children, I think, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. And she'd also lost her husband during the time, and I think with that weary wisdom, she was looking at her son and Thomas and Hetty, and her line was something like false promises, and you bought them all.
Yes.
Which really hit home for me, and I thought that was a nice sort of summing up. How would you sort of sum it all up? Because you went from a young relationship all the way through their times and troubles, and then out to years later in the epilogue, when things are more settled and resolved. What's your sort of feeling of the whole thing now that you've written it?
Wow. That's
Sorry, bit of a question.
So just going back to your first point amongst that, which was about Thomas's mother, and it was a really strange time, because it was a time when the older members of the population had more to fear from the young, because Hitler knew a thing or two. He knew that he had to get to the young because they were much easier to brainwash than the older generation. So literally he brainwashed that kind of almost that entire generation of children, and he felt that parents didn't do a good job, and that's why he had them, it was compulsory to be in the Hitler Youth if you were an Aryan. He wanted to make sure he controlled thoughts and minds. And there were a lot of cases of children informing on their parents about their views. And they were rewarded with ranks in the Hitler Youth, and so that was definitely quite an uncomfortable sort of way to be in that sense, because children are children and they don't necessarily understand the consequences of all their actions. That was the first point I was going to make. The second point was, yes, the book spans a good deal of the 1930s, seeing the progression, and I purposefully stopped it just before the war began. That topic's been covered a lot, and I didn't want really to investigate the whole camps, etc.
No.
And then, yes, it did skip a very long time before the epilogue, but I think people forget that in Eastern Germany, first of all, straight after the war, communication with the outside world was extremely difficult. There was no, the technology isn't what we have today, and trying to find people, there were so many displaced people, nobody had any funds. And then, of course, everything was split into the zones, and quite quickly in Eastern Germany, nobody was able to leave. So it was quite possible that, there was no chance of communicating with the outside world for the next 50 years or so. Which is why I jumped a big period of time to get to the epilogue. And of course, once the wall came down, life had been so different in Eastern Germany to the West that was a massive gulf. So that was the second point. And how do I feel about it? Well, I think, it was a real labor of love, this book. It was, for me personally, it was a journey to try to understand, where my father came from, that part of my heritage, which I'd never really acknowledged before. It resulted actually in me applying for citizenship because people who had their citizenship removed, children and grandchildren of Jews who were ousted by the Nazis or other people can apply for citizenship. So I now have German citizenship, as do my children, and I feel like it's a sort of restitution of some sort. And actually, when we went to collect our citizenship and our passports from the German embassy, we had the most really lovely sort of, not ceremony as such, but meeting with the people there, and how they welcomed us with open arms, and it was really it was really quite heartwarming. I know that there are people who would not like this to happen, but this is what I feel was the right thing to do. So that's from a personal level, and as a book, I just hope that it touches people, and it gives a bit of an insight into perhaps how easy it is really for a nation to become a disciple of hatred, when most German people were just like anybody else. It could happen anywhere, I think, really is the message. And that overall we have to remember that we are all much more the same, and to stop looking for difference, and to see where we're the same rather than where we're different.
That certainly came over. Sometimes I was reading the dialogue and I was thinking, this could be people in our own country saying this, their mannerisms, their ways of speaking. Fascinating what you say about children being used to drive a wedge between their own parents and the state. And what a journey that was for you, and I'm glad it had a happy ending. You don't hear of many books that this is literally life-changing stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's tremendous. I greatly enjoyed it. The more and more I got into it, the more and more I'm thinking about it, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you about it. I found it very interesting and educational, and very enlightening. So I must say thank you, Louise. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I will be talking with Louise Fein again in the next episode, and hearing about her book launch activities in the middle of the COVID-19 lockdown. We also learn what she is writing next as book 2.